The moment the transmission came through, Captain Dorian Hale knew everything was about to burn. He stood alone in the dim bridge of the vigilant dawn, watching the encrypted holofeed flicker to life. On the other end, a room full of pale, sharp-featured galactic leaders, admirals, ministers, envoys, each of them trying and failing to mask the fear behind their jeweled robes and gleaming rank insignias. Their voices overlapped in panicked bursts of a dozen languages. The translator, I struggled to keep up. "Ship's impossible. This violates the core accords. How did the Terrans—" And then the Supreme Marshal of the Senate leaned forward, face cold with fury. "Captain Hale, you are ordered to explain, immediately." Dorian didn't flinch. His uniform was plain black, no gold, no silk, just matte composite fabric, burn-scarred at one sleeve. He'd earned every rip the hard way. His voice was low, even. "Explain what exactly, Marshal?" "You know damn well," the alien snapped. "The fleet you just unveiled at the Kepler Expanse. Ships that violate every technological treaty. Shields that should not exist. Weapons platforms that ignore known physics. Cloaking we cannot track." He let them rage. He had waited years for this moment. Because for decades, humanity had been treated like dirt, tolerated, mocked, blockaded in its little corner of the Orion Arm, given the scraps of trade, denied access to vital shipyards, bullied by arrogant alien empires. And behind their smug superiority, they believed humans were too primitive to catch up, too divided, too emotional, too weak. What they didn't know, humans had stopped trying to catch up. They had gone dark instead. 100 hidden shipyards beneath dead moons. Black labs beneath the irradiated ruins of old Earth. Salvaged tech reverse-engineered from wrecks no one thought they could understand. And now, the proof had arrived. 3 hours ago, at the Kepler Expanse, a neutral trade zone, 30 human warships had decloaked, black hulls gleaming with unknown alloys, gravitic drives far beyond galactic norms, rail cannons and particle lances that could punch holes in battle cruisers at half the usual range, all witnessed, broadcasted, and burned into every node of the Senate's information web. The galaxy had seen. Dorian watched the Marshal sneer. "This will bring sanctions, retaliation. You risk war with the core worlds." And now he smiled. Just a thin line. "Then you'd best be careful which fleets you send, because the ones you know about aren't the only ones we've built." The room exploded in shouting. He muted the audio. Behind him, the heavy door hissed open. Commander Trent stepped in, scarred, square-jawed, a man who'd bled in too many cold space battles. "They're losing their minds," Trent said dryly. "Heard Senate channels lit up from Jupiter to Rigel. They thought we'd be 100 years behind, not 20 ahead." Dorian nodded. His gaze drifted to the star map hovering over the command dais, an array of hostile territories marked in crimson. "They made us desperate," he said quietly. "Now they'll see what desperation builds." He turned to Trent. "Ready the fleet. Full combat readiness. No more shadows." Trent grinned, all teeth. "Finally." The alarms began to sound. Across the vigilant dawn and a dozen hidden human fleets, black warships stirred, drives warmed, weapons primed. In every alien capital, panic began to spread. Because somewhere out there, humanity had built ships that shouldn't exist. And now, they were coming. The black warships of Earth moved in silence. From behind asteroid belts and gas giants, from the shadowed moons of forgotten systems, they emerged, sleek, angular things of matte obsidian and hardened tungsten. No garish banners, no ceremonial markings, just raw, brutal machines built for one purpose, to make the rest of the galaxy bleed. Captain Dorian Hale stood in the observation bay of the Vigilant Dawn, watching the fleet form up in the void. It was one thing to design these ships in secret, one thing to test them in hidden skirmishes or deep space drills, but now they were exposed. The galaxy knew they existed, and soon the galaxy would feel what they could do. Commander Trent approached, datapad in hand. "Tactical brief, sir." "Go." "We have 5 battle groups fully deployed: Dawn, Revenant, Eclipse, Wraith, and Ghost Wings, 42 Capital-class hulls, 110 support craft, cloaks holding, drives ready for long jump." "And response from the Corps?" Trent's lip curled in distaste. "Mass mobilization. Senate's ordered 3 primary fleets toward the Kepler Expanse: 4th Kylan Armada, 9th Drexian Shield, and the Vashan War Priests. Heavy ships. Numbers 5-1 against us." Dorian absorbed this. He'd expected worse. The Corps' arrogance worked in their favor. They still didn't believe humans could fight a real war. "Not yet. They're coming to make an example of us," Trent said grimly. "Think they can cow us with a show of force." Dorian's eyes narrowed. "They'll learn." In the grand spire of the Galactic Senate, panic had begun to turn to conspiracy. Ambassadors shouted in a dozen voices. New intelligence reports flashed across the central holo table. Unconfirmed sightings of strange human ships near old ruins, near ancient derelicts once thought inert. Theories and fear-mongering spiraled. "They must have stolen Precursor's tech. There is no other explanation," one admiral shrieked. "They're bluffing," another said, voice brittle. "Primitive creatures, a desperate show. We crush them now, or they infect the balance of power." The Supreme Marshal, face stone cold, spoke above the noise. "It no longer matters how they built them. The fact is, they have them." He slammed his clawed fist on the table. "Send the fleets, total engagement authorization." Some senators paled. The more intelligent ones knew. Attacking now was no longer a mere police action. It was war. And wars, once started, rarely obeyed the tidy limits of law. On the Vigilant Dawn, Dorian stood before his senior officers. "All right," he said, voice hard. "They're coming. You know what this means. This is no longer cloak and dagger. This is no longer preparation. This is war." He let that sink in. Around the table, hardened faces, men and women who'd seen too much already, nodded. "Our fleets are outnumbered, outgunned on paper, but paper's never won a war." He keyed the tactical display. "We have 3 advantages they cannot counter. 1. Our drives. Our gravitic skip drives can reposition within combat space. They expect lumbering battleship duels. We'll dance around them. 2. Our weapons. Our rail and lance arrays can breach their shields. Core fleets haven't fought that kind of tech. And 3. Our mindset." He leaned forward. "They're used to ritual war. Honor duels. Set-piece battles. We fight to win. There is no honor in losing. No shame in outthinking your enemy." He looked each officer in the eye. "You do what it takes. You kill what you must. You make them bleed until they rethink ever underestimating us again." Trent gave a grim smile. "Permission to open preemptive strikes?" Dorian's smile was colder. "Granted." Hours later, the first clash began. At the edges of the Kepler Expanse, a Drexian shield squadron arrived, a vanguard force of 12 cruisers and escorts. They came in broadcasting demands. "Stand down. Disarm. Submit to Corps authority." Dorian sent no reply. Instead, Vigilant Dawn and 3 Wraith-class stealth frigates decloaked in perfect formation. Point blank. Before the Drexians could so much as raise shields, railguns fired. Hypervelocity tungsten slugs tore through alloy and flesh alike. The lead Drexian flagship disintegrated in a single pass, its crew barely having time to scream. The survivors tried to retreat. Too late. Cloaked human corvettes had already flanked them, firing gravitic torpedoes that shattered hulls and ripped drive cores apart. In 20 minutes, the Drexian squadron was gone. Not damaged, not repulsed, erased. And the battle was broadcast, intentionally, across unfiltered channels. In the Senate spire, the news hit like a fist to the gut. Impossible. They slaughtered them. 12 warships lost, without a reply volley. The Supreme Marshal's face went pale beneath his scaled skin. For the first time in decades, true fear entered his gaze. These are not the humans we knew. Back aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian reviewed the after-action reports with cold precision. No survivors? Trent asked. None, Dorian confirmed. Their comms got the broadcast. Every core world now knows we fight on a new level. Trent gave a dark chuckle. Bet that rattled their precious admirals. Dorian's gaze darkened. They'll send more. Bigger fleets, better prepared. Trent straightened. Then we bleed those, too. Dorian's jaw tightened. Yes, but not yet. He turned to the star map. Next phase, asymmetric strikes. We hit their logistics, their fuel lines, their shipyards. No direct fleet engagements unless we choose the ground. Trent's eyes gleamed. Guerrilla war on a galactic scale. Exactly. Dorian's voice was ice. We make them fight on our terms. No clean battles. No chance for them to paint us as barbarians in defeat. They either bleed trying to catch us, or they kneel. Trent saluted. I'll prep the ghost wings. Do it! In the dark, scattered corners of human territory, old grudges began to stir. Smugglers, privateers, outlaw captains once forced into the fringes. Now suddenly, their tech had meaning again. Human command reached out. Quiet deals made, ancient codes reactivated, and across the fringe sectors, an invisible war began. Sabotaged jump gates, mysterious pirate raids using weaponry no pirate should have, core world convoys lost without trace. And over all of it, one whispered phrase spread on back channels. The Terrans are rising. In the Senate, chaos deepened. Emergency war councils, furious debates, accusations of incompetence, paranoia. Some claimed humans had made deals with dead precursor species. Others feared they'd uncovered ancient weapons buried for eons. But the truth was simpler and darker. Humanity had been cornered for too long, beaten down, forced to the edge. And what does a cornered beast do when left no way out? It learns to kill. Now, with their black fleets loose, the old order was crumbling. And Dorian Hale, standing at the prow of the Vigilant Dawn, intended to finish what had begun. The galaxy bled in places most of its leaders had never bothered to notice. 3 weeks after the first clash at Kepler Expanse, chaos was spreading like a wildfire through the trade arteries and military supply lines of the core. It wasn't grand fleet battles yet. Dorian Hale wasn't foolish enough to throw his still limited forces into a war of attrition. Not yet. No. This was a shadow war, and humanity excelled in shadows. Ghost wings hit deep space fuel depots. Convoys vanished in uncharted lanes. Pirate lords were armed with prototype torpedoes that could tear core patrol ships apart in seconds. And worse, on the wealthiest core worlds themselves, saboteurs struck at the heart of power. It began with the collapse of a Senate-controlled armory orbiting Varnak Prime. An explosion. Deliberate. Quiet. Until it wasn't. Tens of thousands dead. Dozens of advanced warships vaporized in dry dock. The gravity well destabilized, ripping smaller stations apart in a chain reaction. By the time the Senate's security arm had contained the information, the news was already across 1,000 systems. And the message was clear. Nowhere was safe anymore. On Vigilant Dawn, Dorian reviewed the strike reports with a grim satisfaction. The human agents embedded in core territory were few. Too few, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in conviction. And hate. Men and women who had watched families starve under core blockade sanctions. Engineers blacklisted from working on legitimate projects because of their species. Veterans of border skirmishes who'd seen human ships boarded and crews executed as examples. Now those same ghosts of the past worked for him, and the results were undeniable. Commander Trent entered the briefing room, face taut with controlled excitement. "More hits coming in," he reported. 3 supply hubs taken offline. 2 core subspace relays compromised. Communications lag across half the sector now. Dorian nodded. And retaliation? Scattered. Trent allowed himself a faint smirk. They're scrambling fleets, but the more they move, the more they leave gaps, and their officers are rusty. No experience fighting an enemy that refuses a stand-up fight. Good, Dorian said quietly. Keep bleeding them. Trent hesitated. We did lose 1 ghost team. Blackout at Tormek Station. No details yet. Dorian's jaw tightened. Casualties are inevitable. He stood, gaze hardening. But I want whoever did it. Names, targets. We settle debts. Trent's nod was sharp. Already tracking. Far across the stars, in the Senate's inner chambers, fear was turning to paranoia. Admirals blamed admirals. Spies suspected each other. Senators accused rivals of collaboration with the Terrans. And in the shadowed corners of the galaxy, darker forces began to stir. The Vashan war priests, most feared of the Corps' warrior orders, demanded blood. Their fleets began mustering, guided by fanatics who believed humanity's rise was an affront to galactic order itself. Meanwhile, the merchant guilds, terrified by the collapse of vital trade routes, poured bribes into every corrupt channel they could find. Assassins were hired, offers of bounty for the heads of Terran officers, especially one name, Captain Dorian Hale. Back aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian was well aware of the target on his back. He read the intercepted bounty postings with a faint sneer. 500,000 credits for my head, he mused to Trent. They undervalue me. Or overestimate their assassins, Trent said dryly. Then his tone shifted. But there's more. New intel packet just decrypted. Corps hired off-book mercenaries. Blackguard Consortium. Dorian's eyes narrowed. The Blackguard weren't official military. They were worse. Disavowed kill teams, exiled warlords, sociopaths in it for the blood and the coin. They're sending them after us? Dorian asked. Trent nodded grimly. Full strike mandate, no rules. Dorian exhaled slowly. Then we'll answer in kind. The answer came 2 days later. In deep orbit around the abandoned mining world of Hekros V, a Blackguard warship convoy lay in wait, ready to ambush an expected Terran supply run. They didn't know that the bait was deliberate. As the first decoy freighters arrived, Blackguard ships decloaked, only to find their sensors flooded with false signatures. Too late, they realized the real Terran fleet was already inside their formation. Wraith-class frigates struck first, using electronic jammers to blind targeting systems. Then gravitic mines ripped Blackguard destroyers in half. The final blow came from Vigilant Dawn herself. Railgun rounds spearing the Blackguard flagship's bridge in a single surgical strike. The battle was over in less than 20 minutes, and, again, the broadcast was sent across neutral channels. We do not hide. You bleed if you hunt us. Afterward, Dorian paced the observation deck, tension in every line of his body. Trent joined him, silent for a moment. We're winning the skirmishes, Trent said finally. But this won't stay small forever. Core will escalate. They'll come in force. I know, Dorian said. He looked out at the cold stars. And we're not ready for a full fleet war yet. He turned. We need allies. More than smugglers and privateers. Real allies. Trent raised an eyebrow. You mean the fringe lords? They hate the core as much as we do, Dorian said, but they don't trust us. Not yet. Trent was quiet. It's a risk. Deal with the devils, you might get burned. We're already burning, Dorian said flatly. Better to burn while holding a blade. Preparations began. Shadow couriers dispatched to old contacts, whispered invitations to underworld kings, warlords, even old pirate queens, and Dorian prepared to lead the talks himself. He knew no envoy would carry the weight he could. They needed to see him, the man whose fleets were making the core bleed. But even as these plans unfolded, another shadow moved, unseen, patient, deadly. A Blackguard assassin cell had tracked Vigilant Dawn's jump path, and now they were coming aboard. It began with a flicker in the ship's comm grid, a single camera feed looping, barely noticeable. But Dorian noticed. Within seconds he was moving, alerting internal security, summoning Trent. Internal breach, he said coldly. Find them. Kill them. The hunt was brutal. Blackguard assassins, clad in adaptive stealth suits, moved like ghosts through the ship's lower decks. They killed 3 crew before Terran Marines cornered them in the engineering wing. What followed was a savage, close-quarters battle. Shotguns and blades, no room for ranged fire. In the end, only one assassin remained, cornered, wounded. And Dorian himself faced him. The assassin lunged, blade aimed for Dorian's throat. But the captain had survived too many dirty fights to be caught now. A shot rang out, Trent's sidearm. The assassin fell, a smoking hole through his skull. In the aftermath, Dorian stood over the corpse, blood still drying on the deck. Trent exhaled. That was too close. It will get closer, Dorian said grimly. The more we bleed them, the more desperate they'll become. He looked at the stars again, jaw tight. And soon, they'll stop sending assassins. His voice turned dark. They'll send the real fleets. Trent's gaze was cold. And when they do? Dorian's smile was razor thin. Then we show them just how far humanity has come. The rendezvous point was a dead system known only by its old mining designation, K-47 Delta. No life-bearing planets, no major trade routes, just cold rock, dust, and ancient wreckage from a war no one remembered anymore. Perfect for what Dorian Hale needed. Vigilant Dawn arrived first, slipping from skip space in absolute silence. Her escort frigates fanned out, scanning for threats. The system was quiet. Too quiet, perhaps. But that was the nature of the fringe. Here, trust was a currency even rarer than credits. Commander Trent stood at Dorian's side as they watched the long-range sensors. You really think they'll show? Trent asked. They'll show, Dorian said. Word spreads. They've seen what we've done. They know we're not bluff. And they know the Core's coming for us with everything they have, Trent added. Dorian nodded. That's why they'll show. Not out of loyalty, out of opportunity. He turned away from the display, voice harder. Just remember, these aren't allies. They're predators. We have to act like the bigger one. The first fringe fleet arrived 2 hours later. A ragged collection of retrofitted haulers, old war cruisers, and repurposed pirate ships, bristling with mismatched weapons, covered in battle scars. At their head, a blackened dreadnought with no registry marks. The flagship of Craven Dauk, one of the most feared warlords in the Fringe. Next came Vela, Queen of the Void Serpents, a pirate fleet infamous for smuggling illegal tech and running black market arms. And finally, a smaller contingent, the Iron Brotherhood, former miners turned mercenaries, now operating as shock troops for hire. Each came for the same reason: Humanity's Black Fleet had shaken the galaxy, and opportunity always followed chaos. The meeting took place aboard Vigilant Dawn in a secure chamber. Dorian stood at the head of the table, unarmed but wearing his battered captain's coat, every scorch mark earned. Behind him, Trent and 2 guards kept silent watch. Across the table, the warlords took their seats. Craven Dalk, a hulking brute of a man with cybernetic arms and a gaze like ice. Vela, lean, sharp-eyed, dressed in obsidian armor and coiled with knives. The Iron Brotherhood sent a representative, a grizzled man called Merrick, eyes heavy with distrust. For a moment, no one spoke. The room thrummed with tension, predators sizing each other up. Then Dorian broke the silence. "You've all seen what we can do," he said, voice calm but iron-edged. "You know the Corps' coming. They'll try to crush us, and any who stand with us." Vela leaned back, smirking. "And why should we stand with you, Terran? Your fleet bleeds the Corps, but if they focus on you, we stay free." Dorian's gaze locked on hers. "You won't stay free. If the Corps crushes us, they'll come for you next. You're already on their purge lists." He keyed a holo feed, data streaming across the table. Secret intelligence, intercepted Senate orders, future war plans targeting the fringe. As the warlords read, the room's mood shifted. Merrick cursed under his breath. Craven's cybernetic fingers tapped a slow, dangerous rhythm. Vela's smirk faded, eyes narrowing. "They mean to burn us all," Merrick growled. "Yes," Dorian said, "and alone they can pick us off, one by one. Together, we can bleed them dry." Craven's voice rumbled. "You want an alliance?" "A pact," Dorian confirmed. "Temporary. You keep your independence, your turf. But when the Corps comes, we strike together. We make it too costly for them to continue." Vela's eyes gleamed. "And what do we gain from this beyond survival?" Dorian smiled faintly. "Weapons, technology human-designed. You've seen what it can do." He placed a small device on the table, a compact railgun prototype, far beyond fringe standards. "And when the war ends, trade routes, open channels through liberated space." The room went silent again. Calculations flickered in every mind. Finally, Craven leaned forward. "You fight like no Terrans we've seen. If you fight as hard as you talk, I'm in." Vela smiled, sharp and thin. "I do love chaos. I'm in too." Merrick hesitated, then nodded once. "If we stand alone, we die. Together, maybe not." The pact was made. No formal signatures, just oaths given and sealed in the only currency that mattered in the fringe: blood and survival. As the warlords departed to ready their fleets, Trent exhaled slowly. "That was a dangerous game," he said. "Every game is dangerous now," Dorian replied. He watched the stars beyond the viewport. "But this buys us time, and more blades for when the Corps comes." And the Corps was coming. Across the inner systems, full war mobilization had begun. Massive fleet groups drawn from every member race. Dreadnoughts, carrier swarms, escort flotillas. The largest armada seen in a century, under the direct command of High Admiral Kalen Voshtar, a brutal tactician. No love for politics, only victory. And in private councils, Voshtar made no pretense. "We will not negotiate with these Terran upstarts," he said coldly. "We will erase them. We will bombard their worlds, shatter their fleets, and break their will." The Senate wavered, some fearful of the costs, but too much pride, too much fear of weakness, drove them on. And so the order was given: Operation Iron Hand. Back aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian read the intercepted plans with grim eyes. "They're committing everything," Trent said, voice low. "Voshtar's entire armada. Three-pronged offensive. They're not coming to contain us anymore. They're coming to end us. Dorian's expression didn't change. Then we end them first, he said quietly. He keyed a secure channel. Summon the War Council. We begin preparations for the Kepler trap. The trap was audacious, dangerous, but necessary. Kepler Expanse was now bait, a staging ground where the core believed humanity's fleet would gather to resist the coming storm. And in a sense, it would, but on human terms. Deep mines seeded with gravitic charges, cloaked strike wings hidden in asteroid fields, fringe ships ready to strike from unexpected vectors, and most important, skip drive decoys designed to scatter the core fleet into fragmented, vulnerable pockets. It would be the riskiest operation Dorian had ever commanded. But if it worked, it could cripple the core armada before it ever reached Earth. As the final plans were laid, Dorian stood alone in the observation deck. He watched the stars, not with wonder, but with the cold clarity of a man who had chosen his path. No turning back now. No peace to be bargained. They had forced this war, forced humanity to evolve or die, and if the stars demanded blood, then blood they would have. Kepler Expanse, once a neutral trade zone. Now it would become a graveyard. The trap had been laid with ruthless precision. Dorian Hale had overseen every phase, every hidden mine, every cloaked frigate, every falsified comm signal that made the core believe this was humanity's last stand. Now the core armada was coming, a force no sane commander would face head-on, over 200 capital ships, dozens of dreadnoughts, thousands of escorts and strike craft. At its head, High Admiral Kalen Voshtar, a man whose reputation for brutal efficiency stretched across the stars. Voshtar's orders were clear. Crush the Terrans. Break them here. Shatter any hope of resistance. Aboard Vigilant Dawn, the final preparations were underway. Dorian stood in the tactical core, surrounded by his senior commanders and holographic star maps. Voshtar's fleet enters in 3 vectors, Trent reported. Primary force straight through the center, flanking groups aiming to box us in. Dorian's gaze was sharp. Exactly as we predicted. He tapped the map. We let the center group advance first, lure them into the minefield. Flanking groups, we hit hard and fast with ghost wings and fringe strike fleets. Divide them. Force chaos. Commander Vale, leader of the Wraith Wing, spoke next. We won't hold them long. Once Voshtar sees the trap, he'll try to regroup. That's when we trigger Phase 2, Dorian said coldly. Gravitic charges, disrupt their formation, then hit with rail and lance volleys. And if Voshtar adapts faster than expected? Vale asked. Dorian's smile was thin. Then we bleed him the hard way. Hours later, the first sensor pings echoed across the fleet. Core ship's entering system. Dorian stood on the command deck, watching as red markers filled the star map. The sheer size of the enemy force was staggering, an overwhelming wall of firepower and steel. Trent's voice was low. A sane man would run. Dorian's gaze didn't waver. A sane man wouldn't have gotten us this far. Voshtar's flagship, Sovereign Wrath, led the charge. In his private command chamber, the High Admiral reviewed the tactical feeds with a cold, calculating mind. Terran fleet present in expected numbers, his operations officer reported. 30 capital ships, fringe auxiliaries, estimated 40% of projected strength. Voshtar's eyes narrowed. Too few. He leaned forward. They're baiting us. His second-in-command hesitated. Admiral, shall we hold flanks? Await full scan? Voshtar's voice was like ice. Number the Senate demands results. We press. If it is a trap, we break it. And so the core fleet advanced. Massive dreadnoughts burning through the void, carrier wings deploying swarms of fighters. But beneath their pride, they didn't see what lurked beneath the rocks. The first explosions came without warning. A lead battleship, Valiant Flame, struck a gravitic mine, its shields collapsing in a burst of distorted space-time. The ship imploded before it could signal. Moments later, Silver Dominion met the same fate, ripped apart mid-formation. Panic rippled through the core vanguard. Voshtar's voice snapped through command channels. "Push through, full power to sensors, adapt." But then the real strike began. From the asteroid fields, cloaked Terran frigates decloaked in perfect sync. Rail cannons fired tungsten rounds at velocities no core shields had been tested against. Dreadnoughts staggered under the assault, armor breached, decks vented to space. Gravitic torpedoes targeted carrier clusters, detonating in cascading fields that crippled launch bays. Aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian watched the battle unfold with cold precision. Phase 1 successful, Vale reported. Core formation disrupted. Vanguard in chaos. "Order fringe wings to strike the flanks," Dorian commanded. "Hit hard, no mercy." The fringe lords had waited for this moment. Craven Dalk's war fleet surged from the system's outer edge, retrofit battleships screaming into the fray. Vela's pirates struck from hidden vectors, laying into supply escorts and command cruisers with vicious accuracy. And the Iron Brotherhood, hardy and reckless, rammed into core flanking destroyers with sheer brute force. Voshtar's fleet, so carefully ordered, began to fracture. On the command deck of Sovereign Wrath, chaos rippled. Flanks collapsing, multiple losses, carrier groups crippled, strike wings decimated. Terran rail rounds penetrating forward dreadnoughts. Voshtar's expression remained hard as steel. "Order full regroup, consolidate center force, prepare for concentrated push." But Dorian had expected that too. "Trigger Phase 2, he ordered. The final gravitic charges detonated, disrupting the core fleet's attempt to regroup. Ships veered off course, colliding, spinning out of formation. And then Vigilant Dawn herself led the charge. Black Terran warships surged forward, firing rail salvos and particle lances with unrelenting precision. What had begun as a massacre turned into a rout. Corps captains, trained for orderly war, found themselves in a chaotic meat grinder. Voshtar's vaunted armada, meant to crush humanity, was bleeding ship after ship. Yet the High Admiral was not broken. As reports flooded in, he made a brutal choice. "All remaining ships, form kill wedge around Sovereign Wrath," he commanded. "We break through, target Vigilant Dawn, kill the Terran commander." If he couldn't win the battle, he would take Dorian Hale's head as a prize. Dorian saw it coming. "Voshtar's making a run," Trent reported. "Targeting us directly." Dorian's eyes were cold. "Then we meet him." The two forces collided in a storm of fire. Vigilant Dawn's shields flared under the withering assault. But her return fire was devastating. Voshtar's remaining dreadnoughts closed in, desperate to end this war with one kill. But Dorian wasn't fighting alone. From above, fringe ships dove in. From below, Wraithwing struck exposed engines. Voshtar's formation began to collapse. Finally, with his fleet shattered, the High Admiral gave the order he'd never imagined he would. Full retreat. Across the Kepler expanse, core ships fled, hunted by Terran raiders and fringe corsairs. The Great Armada was broken, and in its wake, the galaxy would change forever. Later, aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian stood in the observation deck, watching the debris fields drift. Trent approached quietly. "We did it." Dorian didn't smile. His gaze remained hard. "This was one battle. They'll come back, stronger, smarter." Trent nodded. "But now the galaxy knows. We can't be broken." And across the stars, the message spread. Humanity had survived the unthinkable. Humanity had bloodied the greatest fleet in the galaxy. And humanity would fight. The wreckage of the core armada still drifted through the Kepler expanse, a silent graveyard of twisted metal and frozen corpses. But across the galaxy, the real war was only beginning. News of the Terran victory spread faster than any Senate censor could contain. Footage of shattered dreadnoughts, core fleets retreating in disarray, black Terran warships standing undefeated. It raced through every trade hub, every neutral station, every pirate enclave. In the back alleys of fringe worlds, the Terrans were spoken of with a mix of awe and fear. In core capitals, the shock turned to rage and panic. Inside the Senate spire on Valeri Prime, chaos reigned. A closed war council had been called, but the divisions ran deep. Some senators demanded immediate peace negotiations, fearing further bloodshed. Others, furious and humiliated, called for total war. The High Admiral Voshtar had survived, but his reputation lay in ruins. Now he stood before the council, gaunt and cold-eyed. "They baited us into Kepler," Voshtar admitted, voice like steel. "Their technology outmatches what we believed possible. Their tactics are brutal, and now they have allies in the fringe." Senator Yellen spat. "You fled. You lost our greatest fleet." Voshtar's eyes didn't flinch. "I did what was necessary to preserve what forces I could. Had we continued, we would have lost everything." The chamber buzzed with angry voices, but one cold, calculated voice cut through the noise. Director Kael Varos, head of the Core Intelligence Directorate, leaned forward. "We must accept the truth," Varos said. "The Terrans are no longer a minor threat. They are a rising power." "Then we destroy them," a senator barked. Varos's gaze was razor-sharp. "Brute force alone won't win this war. Kepler proved that. We must break them from within." Voshtar nodded slowly. "Agreed. We will rebuild our fleets. But in the meantime, divide them, undermine their alliances, target their leadership." And one name remained at the top of every list: Dorian Hale. Meanwhile, aboard Vigilant Dawn, the victory at Kepler had brought no peace. The crew worked around the clock, repairing battle damage, replenishing depleted munitions. In the tactical core, Dorian and Trent reviewed fresh intelligence streams. "Core fleets are regrouping," Trent reported. "Voshtar survived. They'll be back." Dorian's face was hard. "Expected." "But the political fallout is worse," Trent continued. "Core member worlds are fracturing. Some want peace. Others want vengeance. Senate's in disarray." "That's an opportunity," Dorian said. He leaned over the holomap. "If we move fast, we can hit their supply lines, force the factions to fight each other over strategy." Trent nodded. "Fringe lords are eager. They smell blood." "Good," Dorian said. "But we can't trust them to stay loyal. Keep eyes on Craven, Vela, all of them." Trent's gaze turned grim. "And there's something else." He keyed a separate data stream, encrypted, high priority. "Intel intercepts from fringe channels. Word is, someone's putting together an assassination contract." Dorian's expression didn't change. "For me?" Trent nodded. "Big money, not just bounty hunters, professionals." Dorian exhaled slowly. Let them come. But in truth, he knew, the next phase of this war would not just be fought with fleets, it would be personal. Far across the stars, another shadow moved. Director Varos was already at work, deploying deep cover agents, forging alliances with mercenary guilds, even reaching out to the most dangerous killers in the fringe. The plan was simple. Cut off the head. Kill Dorian Hale. Break the Terran fleet's cohesion. Shatter the fragile fringe alliance. And Varos knew just who to send. A ghost. Codename: Shade. Back aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian gathered his war council: Craven Dalk, Vela, Marek, all present via encrypted hololinks. "The core is bleeding. Dorian addressed them. "But they won't stop. They'll rebuild. They'll come again, stronger, smarter." Craven grunted. "Then we hit them first." "We will," Dorian agreed. "But we need to strike where it hurts. Not just fleets, infrastructure, shipyards, fuel depots, intelligence centers." Vela smiled thinly. "Now you're speaking my language." Dorian nodded. "We also exploit their political fractures. Some of their worlds want peace. If we can push that divide, force a political crisis, we weaken their war effort." Marek was blunt. "You want us to fight a shadow war while you hold the line?" "Yes," Dorian said. "And if we succeed, when they do bring their next armada, it won't be unified." Craven leaned forward. "And what do we get when this war ends?" Dorian met his gaze without flinching. "A galaxy where the core no longer dictates who lives and who dies." A long silence. Then Craven gave a savage grin. "Then let's bleed them." The plans were set. New strike teams assembled, coordinated raids prepared. The next phase of the war would hit the core from angles they weren't ready for. But as Dorian moved through Vigilant Dawn that night, something gnawed at him. A hunter's instinct, honed by years of battle, the sense that something unseen was now stalking him. In the depths of Core Intelligence Headquarters, Shade received the final briefing. Objective: Dorian Hale. No rules, no limits. Kill him, and the Terran uprising would falter. Across the galaxy, the board was set. On one side, the fractured but rising forces of humanity and the Fringe. On the other, the wounded but still vast might of the core, now desperate, now more dangerous than ever. And at the heart of it all, Dorian Hale, a man who had refused to kneel, a man who had sparked a war that could reshape the stars. But now, the shadows moved, and in the dark, death was coming. The stars beyond the Vigilant Dawn burned cold. The Kepler victory had shaken the galaxy, but Dorian Hale knew the cost. He had made himself the most hunted man in known space, and the next attack wouldn't come from a dreadnought or a rail salvo. It would come in the dark, with a knife or a bullet, meant for him. It began with a subtle shift. Dorian noticed it first in the ship's routines. Small delays in encrypted comms, a brief, unexplained sensor loop in the portside maintenance deck, a missing technician on rotation. None of it conclusive, none of it enough to trigger alarms. But Dorian trusted his instincts more than any algorithm. Late that night, he called Commander Trent to his quarters. "We have a leak," Dorian said. Trent frowned. "You're sure?" "Too many anomalies, and the bounty on me hasn't faded." Dorian's eyes were cold. "They'll send the best this time. Not thugs, not pirates, professionals." Trent nodded grimly. "What's your move?" "Lock down security," Dorian ordered. "Double shifts on sensitive decks, and we sweep the crew." Trent hesitated. "We have Fringe auxiliaries aboard now. Some of Craven's, some of Vela's." "I know." Dorian's voice hardened. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford. Anyone twitches wrong, you put them down." But even as they moved to tighten defenses, Shade was already aboard. The assassin had arrived 2 days earlier, smuggled in with a shipment of captured core tech, masked under the forged credentials of a Fringe tech adept. No one had noticed. No one could notice. Shade was more than a killer. He was a phantom. Ex-CID Black Ops, augmented, trained in silent war. And his target was simple: Dorian Hale. Over the next day, the tension aboard Vigilant Dawn grew sharp enough to cut steel. Security teams moved through the decks in pairs. Background checks ran on every auxiliary. Weapon scans doubled. Crew whispered. Paranoia spread. Dorian stalked the ship, watching, listening. A young comms officer, Lieutenant Avers, was found dead in an access shaft. Spine broken. No trace of the killer. The message was clear. Shade was moving. Dorian stood over the body, jaw tight. Trent joined him, face like stone. "This wasn't random," Trent said. "No." Dorian's voice was ice. "He's telling us he's here." Trent met his gaze. "Then we draw him out." A plan was set. The ship's internal traffic was rerouted. Security patterns randomized. Decoy routines were initiated. Dorian would appear to attend a private strategy meeting in the forward observation deck, heavily publicized across internal channels. A trap, and Dorian would walk into it willingly. Hours later, the trap was sprung. Dorian entered the observation deck, flanked by 2 Marines. The deck was rigged with hidden countermeasures, EM fields, biometric scans. But as the minutes ticked by, nothing. No movement, no attack. Then, lights flickered. A sudden systems spike, targeted, precise. In the control room, the tech crew shouted warnings. "Systems breach! Local override! Deck security compromised!" Dorian moved instantly. "Fallback pattern Delta!" he snapped. The Marines closed around him, but too late. From the shadows, Shade struck. A single shot, suppressed, near silent. 1 Marine dropped before he could even turn. The second fired wildly, missed, then fell with a knife through his visor. Dorian pivoted, sidearm drawn, scanning the darkened deck. "Come on then," he said coldly. "You've come this far." Shade didn't answer with words. A blurred shape moved, fast, too fast. A shot rang out. Dorian ducked, felt the heat of it graze past his head. He returned fire, 3 precise rounds, but Shade was gone, vanishing between pillars. By now, alarms howled through the ship. Security forces raced towards the deck, but they were minutes away. And in those minutes, it would be a duel. Man to man. Dorian moved carefully, heart steady. Every instinct screamed danger, but he forced his breathing slow. Shade was watching, waiting. "I know who sent you," Dorian said aloud. His voice echoed through the shadows. "Veros, the Senate's pet butcher." No reply, only the faint hum of malfunctioning lights. Dorian edged around a pillar, finger poised on the trigger, and Shade struck from above. A leaping attack, blade flashing. Dorian barely twisted aside. Steel scraped his ribs, a burning line of pain. He fired point blank, grazed Shade's shoulder, but the assassin rolled, vanished again. Blood stained Dorian's side, but he ignored it. His mind sharpened. One mistake and he'd be dead. He shifted position, forcing Shade to move, to reveal himself. Another flicker, another shot exchanged, both missed. Then Dorian saw it, a faint shadow, barely a distortion. EMP grenade, thrown fast. Dorian dove, shielded his weapon. The blast shorted half the deck's systems, plunging the room into near darkness. Perfect for an assassin. But Dorian was no ordinary target. He closed his eyes, focused on sound, movement. And when the next attack came, a rush of air, the faint scrape of boots, he turned into it, catching Shade's wrist. The blade missed his throat by an inch. The 2 men struggled, blade against gun, strength against speed. Shade was fast, augmented. But Dorian was ruthless. A savage elbow shattered Shade's jaw implant, briefly stunning him. Dorian slammed the assassin into the bulkhead, once, twice. But Shade recovered fast, throwing Dorian off, blade flashing again, slicing Dorian's arm. Both men backed off, breathing hard. And then, the cavalry arrived. Trent and a squad of Marines stormed the deck, floodlights flaring, weapons raised. Shade didn't hesitate. He vanished into the ceiling conduits, too fast to catch. But blood marked his trail. He was wounded now. Hours later, the search dragged on. Every vent, every conduit was scanned. But Shade was gone. Escaped. In the medbay, Dorian sat as his wounds were sealed. Trent stood nearby, grim. "We almost lost you." "But we didn't," Dorian said flatly. "You were lucky." "No," Dorian corrected. I was ready. He met Trent's gaze. And now we know. They're coming for me. They won't stop. Trent nodded. Then we take the fight to them. Later, in the observation deck, now secured, Dorian stood alone, watching the stars. Shade had failed, but the war was shifting. Assassins, sabotage, political fractures. This was a war of shadows now, as much as fleets, and Dorian knew, if humanity was to survive, he couldn't afford a single mistake. Not now, not ever. The stars were shifting. In the weeks after the failed assassination aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian Hale moved with relentless purpose. The Shadow War had taught him one thing. The Corps would never stop. They would throw fleets, assassins, spies, superweapons, anything to crush humanity's rise. And now, the enemy prepared to unleash their deadliest weapon yet. Intelligence reports came in fragmented, smuggled out by fringe contacts and Terran operatives. The Corps was moving a secret weapon, codenamed Judgment. A weapon designed not to battle fleets, but to wipe entire worlds. A planet killer, built in secret for decades, deep in the core systems where no fringe eye had reached. Now it was coming online, and its first target, confirmed by multiple sources, was Earth. In the War Council chamber aboard Vigilant Dawn, Dorian stood at the head of the table. His commanders, fringe allies, and senior officers surrounded him. The room thrummed with tension. Trent gave the grim report. Judgment is a hybrid weapon, gravitic destabilizer fused with exotic matter warhead. If they deploy it, Earth is gone. Merrick growled, fists clenched. We've come this far, and they still aim to burn us. Craven Dalk sneered. Let them try. We'll cut their throats before they light the fuse. Vela's sharp gaze fixed on Dorian. But we'll need to hit deep, very deep, right into core space. Dorian's voice was hard steel. That's exactly what we'll do. The plan was reckless, dangerous, the kind of operation that left no room for retreat. A deep strike, Terran and fringe ships penetrating core territory, targeting the Judgment platform before it could be deployed. A mission of no return for many. But failure meant Earth's extinction, and the death of everything they had fought for. In the days that followed, the fleet prepared. Ships were stripped for speed and stealth. Crews volunteered knowing the risks. Messages were sent to Earth and the scattered Terran colonies. Prepare for war. Prepare for survival. And Dorian himself sent a final message to the Senate, broadcast openly. If you choose genocide, you will reap it in return. There will be no surrender, no retreat. Far away, in the Senate spire, Varos and Voshtar watched the message with cold eyes. It does not matter, Varos said. Judgment will end this war before they can reach us. Voshtar was less certain. Hale has survived every trap we've laid. Underestimate him again, and we may lose everything. Varos sneered. Then kill him before he reaches Judgment. And so the Corps' last fleets mobilized, an iron ring around their doomsday weapon. Days later, Vigilant Dawn led the strike force into the black. 30 Terran warships, 40 fringe vessels, the most dangerous, most desperate fighters humanity and the fringe had left. Aboard the bridge, Dorian stood in full combat gear, watching the stars streak past. Trent spoke quietly. We may not come back from this. Dorian's reply was simple. We're not here to come back. We're here to win. The breach into core space was brutal. Layered minefields, hunter-killer drones, sensor webs that burned out weaker ships. But the Terran fleet punched through, losing 7 ships in the first hour. Craven's warships led savage charges, ramming aside core picket lines. Vela's pirate wings struck from shadows, crippling sensor hubs and escort ships, and Vigilant Dawn carved a path straight toward the target, the Judgment platform, anchored in orbit above core world Velcaris 3. The final battle began at the edge of Velcaris system. An entire core defense fleet awaited, 80 capital ships, hundreds of escorts. Voshtar himself commanded from the dreadnought Iron Will. He knew this was the last line. If the Terrans broke through, judgment was exposed. He addressed his fleet with a cold, unflinching order. Hold the line, kill Dorian Hale at all costs. But Dorian Hale had no intention of dying quietly. As the Terran strike force entered the system, he gave his final orders. Break the ring, focus fire on escort clusters, get me a window to judgment. Trent's eyes gleamed. Aye, sir. The stars became hell. Rail rounds, lance beams, and gravitic torpedoes lit the void. Terran ships fought with feral precision, each crew knowing they were buying time, inch by inch. Fringe warlords fought with savage abandon, some seeking victory, others glory and death. Aboard Vigilant Dawn, systems blared with impacts, armor buckled, shields flickered. But Dorian stood unbowed, eyes locked on the tactical display. Then, an opening, a breach in the core lines, fleeting, narrow. Now, Dorian barked. Full thrust, target judgment. Vigilant Dawn and its escorts punched through, leaving chaos in their wake. The judgment platform loomed, an immense station bristling with weapon arrays, shielded by the last of the core's elite guard. Already, its core began to charge, spooling up for the planet-killer strike. Dorian's voice was cold and clear. All batteries, target the weapon core. We end this now. The final approach was a gauntlet. Core gunships swarmed, desperate to stop them. Vigilant Dawn took hit after hit, deck fires raging, crew dying. But Dorian refused to fall back. When the ship's main rail batteries went offline, he gave the order no sane captain would. Prepare for ramming speed. Vigilant Dawn, bloodied and burning, drove straight at the judgment platform. At point-blank range, its forward lance arrays fired, piercing through shields, carving into the weapon's core. Explosions rippled across the station, but not enough. The core was still charging. Time was running out. Then Dorian made the choice he had always known he might face. He keyed open the ship-wide channel. This is Captain Dorian Hale. All hands, abandon ship, now! Crew scrambled. Escape pods launched as Vigilant Dawn went into its final run. Dorian remained at the helm, eyes locked on the dying platform. Trent burst onto the bridge. You can't do this alone! Dorian met his friend's gaze. I can. You have to lead what's left. A pause. Then Trent saluted. Good hunting. And he was gone. Alone on the bridge, Dorian pushed the ruined ship to full thrust. Alarms howled. The hull groaned. Fire licked the consoles, but his hands were steady. Vigilant Dawn struck the judgment platform in a cataclysm of fire and steel. The weapon core destabilized, imploding in a chain reaction. A shockwave tore through the system, blinding sensors, frying enemy ships. And as the stars faded from his view, Dorian Hale spoke one last time, broadcast to the galaxy. You will not break us. Humanity will rise. When the smoke cleared, the judgment weapon was gone. The core's fleets were shattered. Word spread faster than any Senate censor could block. Dorian Hale was dead, but he had saved Earth. He had broken the core's will. In the weeks that followed, the war changed. The core Senate fractured, half its members suing for peace, terrified of further retaliation. Voshtar disappeared, presumed exiled or executed. Varos vanished into the shadows, and the Terran Fringe Alliance, battered but unbowed, held the field. On Earth, a simple memorial stood in the capital, a black steel star. One name engraved, Captain Dorian Hale. No titles, no fanfare, just a name, remembered by every Terran child. the man who refused to kneel, the man who changed the stars.